Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
Ensuring students have a well-rounded education that prepares them to participate in the global workforce is the goal of many organizations and programs. North Carolina DNA Day is working toward that goal by getting students interested in the sciences. The program's co-chair, Dr. Josh Hall, recently stopped by our studios to tell us more. Dr. Josh Hall, welcome to North Carolina Now.
Hi, thanks, Mitch.
Now, you are the co-chair of the North Carolina DNA Day 2011. Tell us, how did DNA Day started? How did it start, and what was the mission?
Sure. So DNA Day in North Carolina started, it was about 6 years ago. Francis Collins, who now is director of the NIH, was at UNC Chapel Hill, and he came there because it was soon after the completion of the Human Genome Project. And so scientists had sequenced the entire human genome, and this had a lot of implications for human health. And so Francis Collins came to speak to the UNC community about some of the implications and some of the great benefits this would have to the public and to human health, and really talking about the importance of communicating those findings from the science community to the public. And so after he left, the young scientists at UNC, the grad students, the postdocs, got really excited, and they actually thought through, what can we do to really communicate these DNA and genetics findings to the public. And so North Carolina DNA Day was started at that time.
Now, what do you see as the goals of DNA Day?
So we have several things that we see as important missions of North Carolina DNA Day. First and foremost, we want to educate the high school students across the state on sort of cutting-edge facets of genetics and genomics, and really just things that are important to their life that are related to DNA. So that's one of the things that we hope to do. Another thing is to build relationships between a lot of our research institutions here in the state and the public school. We want to support our teachers. All the lessons that we designed for North Carolina DNA Day, we do with the teachers and their North Carolina standards in mind. So all the lessons, these things we call modules that we present, are totally in line with the North Carolina standards of learning. But another really important thing we want to do is to take the career path of a scientist and really kind of demystify that for high school students, because what we find is that a lot of students across the state have never met a scientist before, or they have a certain viewpoint of what a scientist is like, maybe a crazy old guy with white hair sticking up in a lab coat. So what we have here is we have mostly young scientists in their 20s and 30s going into all these classrooms across the state, and the high school students meet this person and think, oh, I can almost see myself doing what they do. And what that really does, it breaks down a lot of barriers to science as a career path for these young students. So that's an important goal. And kind of the last thing I can think about is really, with all these young scientists that are going out presenting, instilling this almost the spirit of service in these young scientists, and the importance of communicating research and science to the public. So that's another thing that we hope to accomplish.
You had mentioned modules, and during North Carolina DNA Day this year, you had 4 different modules. Talk about those.
Sure. So one of the modules that we do is based on forensics. And so all of the students, and I'm sure you're very familiar with forensics through a lot of the TV shows, CSI. So what we do is we go through how scientists actually in the real world use genetics and DNA to solve crimes. And as part of that, the students actually get to go through a whodunit exercise using DNA and solving a crime in their classroom. And a high point of that module is actually the students get to isolate their own DNA from their saliva. So by the end of the lesson, all the students get to actually visualize their DNA in a tube. And that's really fun for the students. Another module we do is called Pharmacogenomics. And so to break that down, we have pharmacy, so drugs, and genomics, your genes. And so that module really aims at how do our genes dictate how we respond to drugs. And that module is actually really interesting to teach the students about how, when we think about drugs we take, there's not always a one-size-fits-all prescription there. Based on what genes we have, different people can be more or less susceptible to certain drugs. And so, so that module kind of gets at some of those themes. A third module we have is, again, sort of towards the disease slant. It's called Genes and Diseases. And so a lot of us are familiar with the fact that our genes can influence things like our hair color, our skin color, our height, but our genes actually also can dictate how susceptible we are to certain diseases. And so this module focuses specifically on one genetic disease, cystic fibrosis. So the students learn a lot about cystic fibrosis and the genetic basis behind disease. So our fourth module is an immunology module. And so that's a really interesting one, because students learn about how our body is able to recognize millions, if not billions, of different pathogens, so bacteria, viruses. And it's interesting because the human genome only has around 30,000 genes, yet we're able to recognize billions and billions of different pathogens. So the students in the immunology module learn about some interesting genetic tricks that our body uses to be able to recognize so many different bacteria and viruses that might make us sick and really protect us and keep us healthy. So that's a really interesting module for the students as well.
You were also talking about how North Carolina DNA Day impacts the kids, but you also have folks, as you consider, ambassadors. How are they impacted by going throughout the state and doing these various modules?
Right. So DNA Day is a great experience for all of our ambassadors. And one thing we actually find is we have a really high retention rate of ambassadors that go the first time that are really excited and want to go back again. And part of that is, a lot of these ambassadors are young scientists. They're graduate students, they're postdoctoral fellows, and so they spend a lot of their time working in the research lab. So this is an opportunity for them to take all of the knowledge they've gained and actually go out and share that with the next generation of scientists. And I think, to see these younger kids in high school excited about science and excited about the things they're talking about really energizes them when they go back to the lab, to kind of keep in mind why they're doing the things they do and the importance of research, especially for the public.
Now, although North Carolina DNA Day 2011 is over, if you have folks who want to become ambassadors, say next year, or perhaps schools that want ambassadors to come to them, where do they need to go?
So we're always looking for teachers interested in having us in their classroom, and also certainly looking for ambassadors that want to go out to the classrooms. And they can both go to our website. It's ncdnaday.org, and there are links there for ambassadors and for teachers, and they can find all the information they need there for how to sign up.
Now, of course, going across the state, and you have all these folks traveling and all, how is this project funded?
So we rely every year on generous donations from our sponsors, and so each year we're looking for more sponsors to really help us keep this going. So, for anyone out there who's interested in getting involved and they like what they hear and think this sounds like a great project, they can also go to our website, ncdnaday.org, and there's information there on how they can get involved and join our team.
One final question, I'm putting you on the spot. Now, being a researcher, if someone were to come up to you and ask you, why should I be concerned at all about DNA? How is it going to impact me? What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, what I would say is when we think about DNA and genetics and how it's important to us as a society, anymore it's not just important to scientists in the lab studying. DNA is really at the foundation of all medical research right now in human health issues. And so, we're not talking about a future situation, but actually the here and now, the present of medical research, are scientists looking at our genes to determine, just like I was talking about with some of these modules, how our genetics influences diseases that we are more or less susceptible to. And so having a better understanding of DNA and genetics really really helps us as a society be more aware of our own human health and treatments, and because that really is the future of medicine.
Dr. Josh Hall, co-chair of the North Carolina DNA Day 2011, thank you so very much for stopping by and sharing your insights with us. Continued success, sir.
Thank you, Mitch. It was good to be here.
Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.